that's just after 10 o'clock. So good morning and welcome to the meeting of Tayside Contracts Joint Committee. Laura, can I get you to start us off, please?
Thank you. I'll start by taking the roll call. Councillor Rome.
Present.
Bailey Roberts.
Morning, I'm here.
Councillor Short.
Lynn's there. I could see her trying to get on.
Councillor Short. See she's present. Yeah. I've received apologies from Councillor Scullin, I've received apologies from Councillor Shears, and I've also received apologies from Councillor Duncan. Councillor Nicholl.
Present.
Councillor Fotheringham.
Present.
Councillor Cruikshank.
Present.
I've received apologies from Councillor Stewart. Councillor Shepherd.
Present.
And I've also received apologies from Councillor Durno. Councillor Cuthbert.
Convener, I'm substituting for Councillor Durno. Councillor Duff.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm present.
Councillor Lane.
Present.
Councillor McCall.
Present.
Councillor Welch.
Can you notice apologies, please? He can't make the meeting.
Councillor Forbes.
Good morning, I'm here.
And Councillor Shires.
Present.
That completes the roll call. That takes us to item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations?
Laura, Lynn advises she's here but has technical issues. I'll maybe just take the time just to go back slightly because I forgot to mention that just to briefly remind the Joint Committee that the public part of the meeting will be recorded and placed on Tayside Contracts website for public viewing. So members should keep their microphones on mute throughout the meeting unless they're speaking. Thank you.
Thank you. So any declarations of interest? No. That takes us to item 3, membership of Angus Council. The Joint Committee is asked to note the appointments which were made by Angus Council.
Can this be noted?
Noted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 4, change of convenership 2025 to 2026. In terms of clause 4 of the minute of agreement, the term of office of convenership held by Dundee City Council is at an end, and the position of convener is being required to be filled by Angus Council. The Joint Committee is asked to note the appointment of Councillor Nicholl as convener for 2025-26.
So just briefly before I vacate the chair, I just want to say a few words, and don't worry, it won't be an Oscar speech. I just want to say it's been a privilege to be convener over the last year. It's a very important body, Tayside Contracts. It does fundamental work for all of the councils involved. And I'd just like to take the time to thank officers and staff for all the help that they've given myself and the Joint Committee and Vice Conveners this year. And saying that, I just want to welcome Councillor Nicholl into the role, and I'm sure he'll do a fantastic job. So thanks very much, and I'll pass over to yourself, Councillor Nicholl.
Well, good morning to you. I would like to start off with thanking Councillor Stephen Rome for his time as convener. Then we'll go on to item 5, appointment of proper officer. Laura?
Excuse me, please.
Sorry, I didn't see you.
That's no problem. I'd just like clarification, please. I've come hot off of Tayside Joint Valuation Board, and in order to have our new chair, there was a procedure in place where they were nominated and seconded. So I just wonder why this has been an anointment as opposed to a nomination and a seconder.
Willie, could you explain?
Yeah, thanks very much for that question, Councillor Short. In contrast to the Evaluation Board, the office bearers for Tayside contracts are actually nominated and established and agreed by the constituent councils at a statutory meeting, and on that basis those three office bearers rotate on an annual basis on the basis of that, not unless one of them happens to not continue as a councillor or is replaced by someone else at that particular time. So it's an automatic transfer over by rotation in June of each year.
Is that okay? I'll take it as yes. Right, back to item 5, appointment of proper officer. Laura?
Thank you. The Joint Committee is asked to note the appointment of Paul Thompson as proper officer.
Can this be noted?
Noted.
It's agreed and noted. Right, item 6, the position of Managing Director of Tayside Contracts, appointment of Dougie Mackay. Laura?
Thank you. The Joint Committee is asked to note the appointment of Dougie Mackay as Managing Director of Tayside Contracts.
Again, can this be noted?
Noted.
Noted. Right, item 7, position of Head Operatives, recruitment of successor. Again, Laura?
Thank you. The Joint Committee is asked to note that following the appointment of Dougie Mackay to the position of Managing Director, the position of Head of Operations is now vacant and the General Purposes Subcommittee will appoint his successor.
Again, is this agreed? Agreed. Right. Item 8, minutes of the previous meeting, pages 1 to 5. Laura?
Thank you. The minutes of the previous meetings of the 10th of March and the General Purposes Subcommittee minute from the 31st, 25th of April and 29th of April are submitted for approval.
I wasn't there, but is this agreed? Agreed. Item 9, quarterly performance update, April 24 to March 25, page 7. Dougie, could you introduce this report, please?
Thank you, Convener. So the report that we're presenting today is the first in a change to how we are presenting the performance information within Tayside contracts. So as was agreed at the last Joint Committee meeting, there was the establishment of a Joint Committee dashboard which makes performance information available to all committee members within Tayside contracts. And what was also agreed was that to supplement that, there would be a quarterly report that would come up to Joint Committee. So this is the first report of its kind. Before I go into some of the details within the report, what I would say is that I'm open to and would welcome any feedback, one on information that's presented within the report, but also the content. There is a balance here to get as much information to allow the committee to be satisfied that the performance information is being achieved. But what we also want to avoid is just replicating exactly the information that's within the dashboard. Other point I would just like to pick up is that we are in transition, as has been picked up here at committee this morning. Myself taking over from Keith just in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Keith, along with other members of the Joint Committee as part of the working group, were really fundamental in bringing this together. There are some crossovers, so there is some information within the dashboard that currently isn't quite tying in with information that's been presented in the report today. So I just want to give the reassurance to members that's something we're just looking to refine to make sure that we can get these aligned. So my ask is bear with us at this particular moment in time. So just some key points that I was looking to pick up on. So of the performance information on the dashboard, I would note that the financial information on the front page in relation to our distributable surplus and our turnover is in a draft at this moment in time. The financial information will be brought up to the next committee meeting, which we've actually got a week today, in relation to the annual accounts. Once that information has been through that particular process, we'll make sure that all the financial information on the dashboard up to the 31st of March is proper and correct. So just wanted to make everyone aware of that. A couple of other highlights. School meal update. It's a very positive position across all three areas for the year. We've managed to make the budgeted meal numbers in some circumstances actually surpassed that. And say all the targets would have been met if there hadn't been some of the issues around about days of service that were lost due to adverse weather, and also 10 days of a service provision within Perdrick and Ross due to strikes. Other positive position is in relation to our health and safety. Health and safety across the whole organisation is pivotal. Something that I always want to make sure in all the roles I've had within Tayside contracts that every employee who attends work goes home safe and well the next day. And I think sometimes that can be taken for granted. So, and as a comparison to last year, we've had 119 accidents in total, 13 of which were what they call RIDDOR reportable, so accidents we have to report to the Health and Safety Executive, and that was against the backdrop of 126 accidents in 23-24, 24-25, 17 reportables, and against a target of RIDDOR reportables of 15. Moving on to a couple of other points that we've brought within the report, so not just about the performance, some areas where we recognise there's some action required. So under section 5.8, the complaints within the organisation, the information within the dashboard right now just relates to the meal service provision. We are looking to extend that to cover all complaints that are received within Tayside contracts. So an increase on the previous years, but overall of producing 5.7 million meals, we received, I think it was 53 complaints, so 0.001%. We do take on board all the information that comes in from complaints and see how we can deal with that and change the service as necessary. Other area that's noted under 5.9, again under health and safety, was in relation to slips, trips and falls. So of all the accidents that we had, there was quite a large proportion of them came under slips, trips and falls. So we've undertaken some work in relation to rebriefing out to staff. We've done some proactive work in relation to putting information out of what they can do to prevent slips, trips and falls. So again, just want to give the committee reassurance that the data that we do receive in relation to all this type of information is something that we take on board to have continuous improvement. Finally, what I'd like to pick up on is just in some of the other areas which were relating to performance. There was one area in relation to our IT, so we gained or re-accredited to Cyber Essentials. I'm picking out today just because of the information that everyone will be aware of within the press of the attacks, etc., on M&S Co-op, and there's also been some local authorities within Scotland that have had breaches. So our IT team working hard to make sure that all our IT systems are up to date, and that was recognised through the Cyber Essentials accreditation. Our health and safety, again continuing on that particular theme, our construction health and safety assessment, so CHAS, is an accreditation which is recognised throughout industry. It's key for us to continue to maintain that. It's pretty much a prerequisite if we're looking to do any works externally with Tier 1 or other contractors that look for that particular certification. So I'm really pleased to say that we managed to maintain that. Another area within the report which we're just highlighting on some positive works which we'll bring forward in due course at joint committee is in relation to our food waste pilot. So that's about plate waste round about the schools within the Tayside area, something that's come up at committee on quite a number of occasions over the years. So there's an exercise going on with education departments and Tayside contracts to identify plate waste, educate pupils, and then see what we can do to minimise that plate waste going forward. So that is information that we will bring to a future committee once we've got the details. So, Convener, that's sort of an overview of the key points that I want to bring out from the report.
Right, we're open for questions. Councillor Angus Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, Convener, and Dougie, thanks for that detail. You referenced the issue in Perth and Kinross where we lost 10 days of trading. So I've got a couple of questions on that. Do we know what the cost of that was to Tayside contracts, and is that cost borne entirely by Perth and Kinross Council, or is some or all of that cost spread across the whole of the Tayside contracts family?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Forbes. The numbers wise that we were down was about 60,000 meals. In relation to how that's dealt with, as has been reported at committee, we actually changed the process and how we were recharging for meals in 24-25. So there's a reconciliation process that happens every quarter based on the number of meals that was budgeted against versus what was actually taken. Also takes into other considerations of food costs. So the short answer is that any adjustments due to these particular figures in any of the council areas are dealt with in that council area. So that actual 60,000 reduction in meals is something that, so it's not an extra charge, it's just picked up through that reconciliation within the council.
Can I just come back to you and ask, do you know what the cost of it was?
I don't have the cost to hand, Councillor Forbes, but I'm quite happy to let you know what the reconciliation is. I can maybe a book, and I don't know if we have all that sort of detail of the actual cost, because we didn't produce the 60,000 meals. If we could put something notional on it, but something I can look into and get back to you on. Appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Duff had his hand up before Councillor Lang.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for the detail, and I've been in and out of Tayside contracts, so I'm a bit disjointed perhaps, but I think it's good to see the dashboard. I think it was a good development, and certainly welcome it. The one statistic that I would say looks not particularly good is the absence rate, with over 6%. I mean, I can't remember what the council absence rate is at the moment, but it's usually been 2, 3, maybe 4%. 6 seems quite high. Is that something that Tayside contracts are looking at and are working on? Because it does seem a little bit higher than perhaps you'd expect.
Yes, Councillor Duff, the sickness absence rate is something that we keep and monitor on a regular basis. Within the dashboard, we were set our target for sickness absence in the year at 6.3%, and we achieved that 6.3%. Given the backdrop of sickness absence post-COVID, that's not out of line with any other, if you want to say, local authorities that have seen an increase in sickness absence. And what I would say is that the blend of office-based staff and our frontline workforce is where you then do see a slight discrepancy when you're looking at numbers across, particularly the 3 partner councils within the Tayside area. We are maybe more aligned when you see then some of the services that other councils deliver where they have that service in-house. Again, reassurance that sickness absence, we have sickness absence management policy that is in place, and we review the information that comes through from that, and it's an area that we know is a cost pressure, and we'll always look to try and see how much we can get that down. Okay.
Councillor Grant Lane.
Thanks very much, Convener, and thanks for the introduction, Dougie. It's actually Councillor Duff has stolen my question, but really I was wondering if you could quantify the financial cost to the business caused by the average of 13.4 days annually per person caused by sickness absence, as this is nearly it's nearly 2.7 weeks per individual. And I was wondering, can you show examples of how HR are working proactively to reduce this? So basically a figure that can be attributed to sickness loss and the proactive measures being taken by Tayside contracts to reduce it.
Thanks, Councillor Lang. Yes, we have the financial figures that relate to those numbers in effect from the cost of the salaries, and that's something that we would normally bring up to the Joint Committee on a separate report. That was agreed not to bring that up going forward. So what I can look to do is how we bring that information either into a dashboard, maybe at a year end, or within some of the key points that maybe is additional information within the quarterly report. Unfortunately, off the top of my head right now, I don't have the information to say exactly what that financial figure is. But again, I'm quite happy to get that and share that with the members. In relation to dealing with the sickness absence, so you're saying, and the proactive approach, we do have the opportunities to look to see how we can get employees back to work earlier. So through our occupational health, if we're looking at things, is it about can we get people to come back through whatever the mechanism through PAM, the occupational health. As I said, making sure that we actually keep on top of the sickness absence. So our trigger points that we have within that, is there anything that's actually recurring that's coming through that is that's causing people to be off? So our sickness absence, the significant proportion of that is down to stress and the areas that come within that. Off the top of my head, I think about 50%. So we've got a wellbeing strategy in place that we have and we review as a corporate leadership team and push out information to the employees to be able to again support them in that particular area. So again, you know, I'd just like to give that reassurance that it's not just a case of, and I'll say, the stick of you're off and you need to come back to work. We very much do work with all employees who are off to try and ensure that we can get them back to work as quickly as possible.
If I can, Convener, thanks very much, and that is reassuring because it is something that we need to work on. But I'd appreciate, I'm not asking for correct, exact figures, Dougie, but you must have an idea of the quantum that we're talking about here, because I think it'll be quite substantial, and just have an idea in the ballpark figure of where you are with this, and then we could see how these measures that you've talked about are helping reduce the figure moving forward, be useful. So I don't know if you have just a ballpark figure of where we are.
I have a thought of where the ballpark figure is in my head, but maybe to do with something else. Right, okay. I want to say that the direct cost of sickness absence to us, and I'm looking to land of around about £1 million, I think it is. So that's on the salaries. What we are then also conscious of is that indirect, right, okay, and we look to see how we can quantify that as well. That becomes a bit more challenging if you've got people having to work additional hours to fill that gap. But it's around, off the top of my head, the direct cost of sickness absence to Tayside contracts based on that 6.3 is around about £1 million. But say we do have that. I'm quite happy to get that information and share it and just see how we can actually incorporate it within these future updates. Because I do want to give the assurance, and I could say, to go back to a particular report where we actually came up with I think in August, there would normally have been a sickness absence update report, but part of the rationalisation of joint committee reports and inclusion within the quarterly performance update, it was agreed at last committee that that's not something that would be brought forward. But it may be that it's something that, at least on an annual basis, it is.
Thanks very much. Thanks.
Councillor Sheena McCall.
Thank you, Convener. My question is also on the same subject, and it's more to do with in relation to the accidents, particularly the ridder accidents, which very often necessitate time off work. How much do these contribute to the overall absence rate?
So again, unfortunately, I've not got the exact details of where the number of days, but on the accidents, we do not just report on the total accidents, it is lost days. So lost days last year, again, we have that information that I can share, and as a direct comparison to sickness absence, we would, that's obviously factored within that. And we can then say, right, okay, is this down to accidents? Is it down to, say, stress? Is it down to something else? So specifically around about the accidents and ridders, we investigate every ridder accident, goes through a full investigation process, seeing for those lessons learned and to be able to implement them to prevent that accident from happening. That automatically, but then that runs through to hopefully address things like sickness absence due to accidents.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stephen Rome.
Thank you, Convener, and apologies, I picked the only seat in the room where I'd have to share a mic. I'll sort that in a minute. Mine was also on the theme of the Ridder accidents, and I just want to ask, I don't know if you yourself, Dougie, or Ibukin, in terms of those accidents, obviously a lot of those will occur outside during roadworks, etc., in environments we don't necessarily have control of on a regular basis, but others will occur within the CPU, I'd imagine, an environment that we absolutely control. So I just wondered if you could maybe tell the Joint Committee what measures we've taken to make the CPU as safe as possible, and if not, you could come back to Joint Committee with that information, please.
Yeah, Councillor Rome, quite happy to give some more information directly to that. I would say from my knowledge, the number of accidents specifically related to the CPU, I want to say are nil or minimal. The reference within the performance report round about the facility services division actually does come down to the sort of the catering, not the catering side, the cleaning side. We've had quite a big movement upwards in the particular accidents there, and that was round about slips, trips and falls. So we've, and Ibukin and our team have been looking at that, refocusing. We are in the process of developing what we call toolbox talks in relation to that particular workforce, just to be able to give those tips at the beginning of a shift to focus on the areas that they can possibly minimise the opportunity of these particular accidents happening. But from my knowledge, I think any accidents at the CPU are minimal, and it is because that's in a very controlled environment.
Thank you.
Councillor Angus Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Back to my favourite topic of school meals, and 5.12 is telling us that free school meal uptake 61%, which I think we all agree is far too low. I'm interested in what where we think these children are going to eat. I mean, I hope they're eating something somewhere, and I assume they're not buying school meals. So is it reasonable to say they're all going out and buying something somewhere else? And do we have any data on that?
We don't have any specific details on where everyone is going for a meal. So within, I would say, the primary school setting, there is the opportunity to get a free school meal within there up to primary 5. There's then just been introduced for 6 and 7s, those who meet the criteria they can get that. There's packed lunches that would come within the school meal, and you will still get pupils who will go home, for a meal at lunchtime within the primary school setting. What I would say is that year on year, following, and I know people don't like that reference to COVID, but we did take quite a dip. We've year on year been increasing that school meal uptake overall, and in relation to free school meals. And we are at that particular point, that level of where we were going into COVID. In relation to secondary school meals, again, these have been uptake in secondary school meals have improved significantly year on year. And I think, again, that's testament to those within the team that are putting on the meals and the service that the school kids are looking for, but at the same time making sure that they follow the government guidance in relation to the sort of food and nutrition. For those, we do know that they will go out and about to local providers within the areas round about schools, but we're not seeing that as much as what it was previously. So if you want to say the burger van that was outside the school, we're not seeing them as much as what they had been previously. To actually try and identify where they're going, Councillor Forbes, as I said, is a challenge, but we are engaging. So through school, through the school and the surveys and engagement with the pupils of reasons maybe why they're not taking up a school meal allows us to say, right, okay, are they going somewhere else, or what can we do to actually attract them to have the school meal either in primary school or in secondary school.
Thanks, Dougie. Convener, can I just come back with a quick follow-up? Yes. So, as far as I understand it, there are two types of free school meals. There's the primaries 1 to 5, where everybody gets it, and then there are school meals that free school meals you need to qualify for. And is there a difference in numbers between those two?
Yes, Councillor Forbes. Those who, if you want to say, meet that criteria for 6 to 7s is quite minimal. Again, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but when we were looking at this, when this was introduced, we asked all, because that's not something, it's not information that Tayside Contracts holds. That's something that comes through from the school. But when we approached all 3 councils before this actually came live this year, they anticipated those particular numbers to be relatively low. Again, I don't have the detail around about that, but I'm quite happy to get some information and share it.
Okay, thank you, Dougie. Cheers.
Councillor Caroline Shires.
Thank you, Convener. My question also, Dougie, is on the school meals. We really appreciated the session and the information about the issues that were in the press around the meat-free days. In the paper, it refers to more engagement with local producers. I just wondered if you've any further detail on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Shires. I've not got detail in relation to these have been set up, but coming into post, it's something that I've committed to across, if you want to say, some of the 4, if you want to say, strategic areas that I'm looking to take further steps forward. And that's one where we had very good intentions a number of years ago to have a regular engagement with local producers to see how we can facilitate them into the supply chain of Tayside Contracts. That's something, as I've said, through sort of other separate engagements with yourselves and some of the members that we will look at. As I said, I'm not using an excuse. I know I've been within Tayside Contracts, but just sort of getting my own feet as managing director at the same time, having the previous post. But it's not something that's going to be left for months and months and months. I just need the time to sort of look at how we can do that with our council colleagues, those who we've engaged with before. So if that's through the framework contracts, through, for example, National Farmers Union, just touching base with all these to see what we can do.
Thank you.
Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yeah, I just wanted to go back again on the, if you like, the 40% that don't take school meals. Do we know if that's an age-related thing, so that by the time they get to 16, they're much less likely to take a meal than when they're 12 or 13? Do we have any data on that?
I wouldn't say specific data based on age. The secondary school meals were a challenge for a number of years. As I said, the uptake of actually secondary school meals is probably where our biggest growth has been, of being able to provide these. What we have found is that those who start to come, have come through receiving a meal from primary, then being able to go into the secondary school, that they're used to that particular, if you want to say, the provision of meal service. And when they come up to secondary school, so they get the sort of the engagement sessions, or before they go, if we want to say, from primary 7 up to first year, they also are introduced to the new system within the school setting there. And again, that's been well received. I've actually seen that myself, having attended a couple of the schools in just in the last 2 or 3 months. So I don't again have details to say that there's a drop off, but secondary school meal uptake is definitely improving for ourselves.
Councillor Dave Cuthbert.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, I'm just wondering, do we have comparative data for other councils around Scotland for the take-up of school meals? I mean, is it 61%? Is that good? Is it bad? Is it in the middle?
So, where we have is comparisons that we can put in through the APSA returns. Again, don't know if that's something, a booking that we do have specific references on the uptake. I think at that level we can be able to say, right, okay, what's the primary school meal uptake in Scotland as an average. They also have what they call within sort of family groups that they sort of align yourself to, so you're not getting compared within, say, an island setup compared to a city setup within Dundee. So I would say through our annual APSA performance return, there should be information that relates to that. Again, I've not got the specific details of all the sort of headings that covers, but there definitely is information within that we can share.
I'm just curious to see if we can do specific councils to see what their food offering is as well, so we can make a comparison, sort of say, well, that's a really good uptake and that's a different choice, if you like.
The way the information shared is, I don't say blind, right, okay, so it doesn't come up saying here is Dundee, Angus, Perth. We can get an indication, so it's coded. There's reasons for that some local authorities are quite happy to be open and transparent, and others aren't. How councils then determine the meal service that they want to provide is obviously up to them. The reassurance that you've got from ourselves in Tayside contracts that we're compliant with the regulations, that we're meeting the requirements of the Scottish Government's food and nutrition guidelines. Our experience is that some local authorities have, for whatever reason, chosen maybe not to follow these as fully as what we have within Tayside contracts. And finally on that, and that's to the point where we've also been independently audited by the government body who's employed to ensure that that's done. So for me, these are key factors that we've got to look at in relation to the sort of the meal numbers and the uptake and what others are offering across Scotland.
Any more questions or comments on it? No more questions. Is this report noted? Noted. Thank you. Item 10, Local Code of Corporate Governance and Annual Governance Statement, page 15. Dougie, again, would you like to introduce this report?
Yes, thanks, Convener. So, as is laid out within the report, this is the corporate governance statement for Tayside contracts and our annual governance statement. And as part of that, there's the support and information to back up, what it is that we're doing to comply with that. The recommendations are to approve the three appendices, so the corporate code of governance, the annual governance statement, and some minor changes to our financial regulations. I'll just go over very briefly, Convener, of what these are. So the whole purpose of this is aligned to a framework and guidance through SITFA and SOLAS. So delivering good governance in local government is where this actually comes from. It was something that was been introduced for councils for quite some time, but within Tayside contracts was back in 2012 was the first time we went through this particular process, and it was last updated in 2024 when it came to committee. As is referenced within the report under item 4.7, the actual local code of corporate governance is supported by that annual governance statement. So there's a detailed look of all the areas that we need to sort of cover within that particular document. I know that the appendices within that are quite lengthy. Hopefully that gives the assurance to the members round about the focus on corporate governance and where we go to look at that. So the actual local code of corporate governance is reviewed by the managing director and the corporate leadership team within Tayside contracts. Following that review, there were no fundamental or any changes actually required with that particular document. We felt that covered all the areas that were relevant to us. In relation to the supporting document, so the annual governance statement, again, within that 78 items identified. Of that was 76 which were identified to be fully compliant, so nearly 97%. 2 items, 3%, which were minor improvements. Those two particular areas were roundabout just ensuring all our operational procedures are appropriately documented. So what I would say is I think that's something that's always on a rolling agenda. There will be areas that come up that we need to put process procedures in place that we've not actually had to implement in the past, and others that need to be refreshed. Having looked at that, there are still some gaps within it and some refreshes. And then the other area that we identified was just a review of our retention schedule for documents. So again, not really anything I would say of significance or materially, but an area that we've not looked at for some time, and we'll look to pick that up. So with that information within the local code and the annual governance statement, I believe that demonstrates a high standard of compliance within Tayside contracts round about local governance. And the last item that was referred to there was our financial regulations. So these have been reviewed and updated. A couple of minor changes within that was required. One was just to ensure that the report that was approved again at last committee round about the increases in goods and services and works thresholds to be reported to committee at 50,000 over 100,000 has been updated within the report. And following our management restructure back in November, a number of post references titles have been updated so that they're covered within the financial regs appropriately. So, Convener, that's all I was looking to go over on this particular report today.
Thank you very much. A very thorough report. Are there any questions on this report? Councillor Sheila McCall.
Thank you. It's more a comment or a couple of comments rather than questions, I think. If that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. First of all, I think it's excellent that we're using the Code of Corporate Governance. It provides some consistency. So thank you for that. I think in terms of the presentation of the report, it would be helpful if there's some cross-reference to the particular code that we're measuring ourselves against in the report. It would just make it easier for being able to look back and see what the code actually says. And to that end, just, as an example, I would use item B2, which is on page 4 of the Corporate Code and on page 28 of our pack, engaging comprehensively with stakeholders. And the third point, ensuring that partnerships are based on trust, a shared commitment to change, a culture that promotes and accepts challenge among partners, and that the added value of partnership working is explicit. I think that part of that is definitely there. But on item 7 on page 62 of our pack, we've given ourselves a 4, and I really do think that based on the conversations we've had about our own minute of agreement and some of the concerns we have around that I'm not quite sure a 4 is the appropriate measure for that, because I think there are still a number of unanswered questions that we have.
Thank you very much. Dougie, do you want to reply?
Yep, I'm quite happy to take that on board. We'll have a review of the document. As I said, there is a level of subjectivity there around about those scorings. I think for me is the reassurance that there's nothing materially out there. So it's maybe not a 4, it's maybe a 3. It's definitely not a 1 or a 2. So I think that's the reassurance that I would say that for all the joint committee members and beyond that has that particular assurance that we can pick up on that.
Yeah, I would agree, Dougie. I think it is more of a 3 than a 4 in that particular aspect. And if it's possible to reflect that, I think that's more accurate reflection of the status quo at the moment.
Thank you very much. If there's no more questions or any more comments, can this report be approved? Agreed. Item 11, date of the next meeting. Laura.
Thank you. Just to advise that the next meeting of Tayside Contracts Joint Committee will be a special meeting on Monday the 23rd of June and will be held fully remote on Microsoft Teams.
Thank you. Can I also comment that Councillor Cuthbert will be chairing that meeting? And can that be noted then, the date of the meeting? Right, confidential items. Laura.
Thank you. To advise that we are now going on to the confidential part of the agenda, and I'm asking the Joint Committee to agree to exclude the press and public for the remaining items.
Is this agreed? Agreed. I would also ask the members of the press and the public who are present to leave the meeting now, and the clerk can stop recording.